Namaste and welcome to Wise Owl Career Guide. Today we have Miss Manjula with us, who's been working in the field of HR. Let's hear from her what has her story been like. Welcome, Manjula.
Thank you, Neha.
So, Manjula, what has been your educational background?
Neha, I did my graduation in science, which was BSc chemistry, and then I pursued my MBA in HR and marketing. And then as a specialization, my major was HR, so that's how I got into HR.
So, why the shift from, chemistry to MBA?
This is a question that I've answered almost in all my interviews, whether professional or otherwise. So just to give you a brief understanding, I think back in those days, most of our decisions were influenced by our parents. I mean, I'm talking of a time in the 1998 or the 2000 and 2003 when I was graduating and all of that. So my father has been a very, a strong force in my life. And he himself, he had done chemistry, BSc, MSc, and then an MBA. So for him, it was more of a professional requirement. So he told me, start with chemistry first. And then if you want to become a researcher, if you want to become a scientist, or if you want to do something in applied sciences, we will look at that. Otherwise, you can always, take the other route. You can get into, the other route, and you can get into something like an HR. So you'll have both the options open for you. So when I finished my BSc chemistry, I thought research might take a long time. I wanted to, quickly get into the work mode. And with his consultation, I thought, yeah, why not HR? I mean, it was not so booming at that time. It was just a stream, which was getting started. But then I thought, why not? Yeah. So that's how from chemistry to human resources.
So how was your first job like?
Oh, well, that was with a manpower consultancy. So I was hunting for a job after finishing my MBA. We didn't have a lot of campus placements, through the college. So off campus is where I found my job. And I was in one of those vicinities, localities looking for a job, and I happened to see a board of a consultancy. I got in with my CV. It was all very filmy if I look at it, now. But I walked into that, and I gave my resume, and I was an MBA fresher that time. But I think I was very confident. I think at that age you're very fearless because obviously you've not experienced the ups and downs of life when you begin your career, right? So I was very fearless. I just walked right into the room with my resume. I gave my resume, I gave my interview. The proprietor of the firm, he was happy with my performance, and a confident fresher, definitely helps in recruitment. So he said, I would want you to take care of the recruitment as well as I would want you to also work on client acquisition. Get to the right people or in the organizations and try and get some business for us as well. So that's how I started my career with the manpower consultancy.
Okay. So throughout your career so far, you've held various roles in HR. Could you share them in a brief this thing of what all kind of roles you've done?
So when I started as a recruiter, more into the technical side, and then I moved on to work into a BPO. There I did a lot of hiring for the BPO sector, and I was also exposed to the other functions of HR. Whether it was employee engagement, whether it was performance management, a bit of this and a bit of that is where I got into. And then eventually I moved into a bigger brand, and that's where I did all my major learnings into HR. And then I moved into an organization where I was leading a team, and I would say by the grace of God, I had the opportunity to set up the entire process from scratch. So I would say that was a big, so that was a big learning for me. When you do something by scratch, I think there are a lot of things that you can learn in the whole process. So yeah, so I've touched upon recruitment, I've touched upon the generalist functions, I've done a little bit of the business aspect of the HR as well. Because when you have a career spanning 15, 16 years, I think I've been lucky enough to have that kind of an exposure.
Right. So I just wanted to understand, when freshers come into the MBAs, join organizations, nowadays they're very clear that, this is the particular role or function I want to be a part of in HR.
Right.
When that doesn't happen, there is a feeling of dissatisfaction. What would you suggest for them?
I think for freshers, I would say that you have to be flexible in HR, because
Hmm.
unless and until you don't start with the basics of HR, like if, for instance, if you want to become a business partner right away, it may not be a possibility, because you need to have a strong understanding of what the business is all about, right? So
Right.
it may be good to start with recruitment, where you understand what kind of workforce the organization is hiring. When you get a
Hmm.
good understanding of what kind of workforce the organization is hiring, you may get a good understanding of what kind of requirements they will have at the performance measurement end, at the L&D end, at the engagement end, right? So it will give you a first hand experience of these things. And perhaps that will make you a better HR business partner, right? It sounds all
Right.
very fancy to be a business partner, but then the role is pretty challenging. So if you started something like a recruitment, or if you started something like operations, which is the backbone of HR, right? It will give you an
Hmm.
all round experience of what HR is all about. You will get
Right.
exposed to payroll, you will get exposed to various policies, various processes, and then you'll be more prepared to take on the opportunities which come your way, rather than
Right.
being very particular or very choosy about this is where I want to be. If you get it, good for you. I think you can start anywhere and pick up from there. But if you don't get it, then learning is the way.
Okay. This brings me to my next question that, when a fresher starts, obviously the kind of work that they're given is very basic. It's not, that you've joined into the policy role. So you will start designing the entire policy for the
Right,
organization. Right.
right.
So what is the kind of work that, in any of the HR functions, that if you could give me an example of what is the kind of work they start with and how it grows?
See, generally in my experience, I have seen a lot of people using the freshers. Perhaps I have also used them for a lot of interview coordination, for a lot of recruitment related work, because recruitment is where you need more hands, always,
Right.
because the fight is always for manpower, right? So most of the
Yeah.
freshers, they would start in recruitment, or they have also started in operations, where
Mm-hmm.
you don't start with policy making, or playing the bigger role in the department, but you're part
Right.
of various discussions, you're contributing in some way. I think for from a fresher's point of view, it is very important to be open to learning, and
Right.
not look at anything in the HR function as something which is probably not interesting, or probably a little lower in terms of what am I doing here. Don't have that thought. I think in HR there is so much to do and there is so much to learn. That is, as long as you have that instinct in you that I can do it, you will get there eventually. So whether you're
Right.
given a job of just passing on resumes and culling out the candidates from the various CVs that you're getting, or doing the interview scheduling, I always believe that anything, not only in HR, in any aspect of life, any profession that you take up, anything that you
Right.
do, it could be the smallest of the smallest thing, you are learning something, and eventually when you grow in your career, when you look back, you'll be thankful that you did that.
Right. So, what are the kind of skills, that companies look for when hiring freshers for HR department, per se? Are companies now lo only looking at MBAs, or graduates also have a scope?
I think nowadays definitely the preference is given to the MBAs.
Okay.
Back in those days, I think it was open to any graduate as such. But nowadays, definitely the preference is given to the MBAs, also because of the fact that the B school kind of prepares you in certain areas, so you're a little more prepped up when you're coming into the field, right? And the
Right.
kind of professional exposure that you get on the campus also, whether it is your summer internship, whether it is your project work, or whether your mentor on the campus, the industrial speakers there, right? So the MBA definitely imparts you with a wider professional exposure, and that in
Right.
turn is helpful when you get into the HR profession as such.
Okay. And what are the kind of soft skills that companies look for when hiring HR professionals?
I think one of the most important things would be communication and clarity of thought, because
Okay.
as an HR, you are going to be involved in a lot of people communication and a lot of human interaction. So it's very
Right.
important that you're very clear in your thought process, and of course, you have to have effective communication skills. Your people skills have to be very strong, which is you need to have a lot of non-judgmental listening skills. When I say
Mm-hmm.
non-judgmental, you have to be the most unbiased person in the room and listen to the story completely, and then always act as a mediator and a facilitator in any
Right.
situation. So I think
Okay.
somebody who is very good with mediation, somebody who is very good at listening, non-judgmental listening, and somebody who can, of course, empathy. I think is very important nowadays because the times that we are in, it's very important to have empathy as well. So somebody who has empathy, somebody who is good at communication, somebody who is, I would say, very open-minded, non-judgmental kind of a person, good listening skills because HR is all about listening to people, would definitely do well at the role.
Right. Okay. And you've done recruitment as well. You've, been on the outside as well as the inside of an organization. A lot of people find, dissatisfaction with the role that they are in and want to switch in
Hmm.
terms of, let's say, a HR professional wanting to get into marketing or a marketing professional wanting to get into sales or HR. What is your suggestion? How do they go about, building that background for themselves for that kind of a switch?
I feel, Neha, it is very important in the first place to understand that why you are where you are. You made a conscious decision to get into a certain field, right?
Right.
And so you must have very strong reasons to make that switch at any given point in time in your career, which is absolutely fine. But let's not be driven by what the market says. Let's not be influenced by what everybody else is doing. I think you should take a very informed decision. And at the end of the day, if you're not happy being an HR or being a digital marketer or being a data analyst for that matter, then
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter what you do. So if you want to do a career switch just for the what the market says or what everybody else is doing, or for just for the sake of making more money, you could have your own reasons, but make a conscious decision because career switching is a very important decision. So it
Right.
should be with a lot of information that you have with you, and then you should take the switch, because being in a role and not being satisfied and not being able to do justice to it will be worse than not switching. So you
Right.
might as well switch and give it a shot, and know you might as well succeed, right? Because you've done something and you know that you're not good at it,
Right.
you can make the next step.
Right. So, outside India, in the job markets in Europe or US, it is easier to do this kind of switches, whereas in India, it is still hard to do those switches. What would be your tip of somebody looking for that kind of a switch? So, let's say today a marketing professional comes and says, I want to be a HR person. You have an opening and they come and apply for it. What are the things that you would look and would you consider, a person like that for a HR role?
See, I would say, Neha, yes, definitely.
Hmm.
Because as I said, I mean, an unhappy marketeer is better than a happy HR. I think at the end of the day, you want the person to do well in the role. And if they have the necessary skill set, I'm sure
Hmm.
after working, for a couple of years, or even as a fresher, if you had the wrong start, there's no harm in taking a U-turn and then taking another route altogether, right? So as long as
Absolutely.
you have the necessary skill set, I think I would bet on a person like that. I would give them the necessary support, the necessary guidance, and see how it goes. I think that
Okay.
chance everyone deserves, to take that call as to where I want to take my career, even though I started maybe at the wrong place.
Right. So if I were to ask you for that one tip for, freshers to keep in mind to make a successful career, something that they should always carry with them if they want to keep progressing well in their career, what would be that tip?
I would say that have excellent listening skills. I think don't
Okay.
jump to conclusions. Have excellent
Hmm.
listening skills. Don't jump to conclusions. Have a very open mind when you're approaching something, because you're approaching something as a fresher, right? So have a very
Right.
open mind and learn as much as you can. Life has lots to teach us. So always be open to learning. Don't take failure to your heart. Definitely never take failure to your heart. Failure is going to be a part of your professional life. There's not a single person who would say that, oh my, all 7 days of the week have been like, wow, I've like outdone myself always, right? It never happens. So let's
Right.
be very realistic in our approach. Let's be open to learning. I think humility always goes a long way. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think whether you're a fresher or whether you're an experienced person, it's very important to be humble, learn as much as possible, listen, because that I think is very important if you want to get into the profession of HR. Listening, I think, definitely, and empathy,
Right.
kindness. In general, for any role, I think these things will make a difference for a fresher.
Thank you so much, Manjula, for joining us today and sharing your career journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Neha.
So that was Miss Manjula sharing with us her career journey and how she started with science in her education and moved into HR and has been working for last 15, 16 years in the profession of HR. She's seen various kinds of roles, and what she said that irrespective of which department, which role you're working in, your listening ability is something that is always going to work for you. If you cannot listen to feedback, to the encouragement your colleagues, your seniors, even things that your juniors tell you while you're working, if you're not going to pay attention to that, your learning curve will become smaller and smaller. Always remember that as long as you're willing to learn, understand, you will have a successful career in whichever segment role that you decide to work in. I hope this video had something to learn from. If you have any questions that you want to ask Manjula, do write to us in the comments box below and we'll get back to you. Also, do like, share, and subscribe the channel. Thank you.